Ministry of Education in Sudan. I'm coming this conference to clear some problem in our Sudan education. All my child students and youth Sudan out of education the war making us out of schools. Maybe 1,500 absent school because of war, because the militia make war in Sudan. Sudan children, all Sudan children at this time are refugees out Sudan, out school. I ask all نستفيد من الكونفرنس. أنا أسأل كل المنظمات. أنا قاعدة هنا I'm crying because I know this in Sudan in conference حقيقة. Ask UNICEF, Save the Children, UNESCO to help our child in Sudan. Make them go back to school. I think the militia, yes. I'm sorry, I'm crying because I'm very, very affected. I don't listen to Sudan in conference.
No, absolutely. I think this stresses the need for peace and for also key stakeholders as well as partners to ensure that we take measures that support our civilians and students as well as teachers. Thank you so much for your intervention. I'll pass the floor back to Mike. Is there anyone else that would like to share some messages? Please feel more than free. I'll be happy to pass you the mic. I know, but...
So thank you so much, neighbors who have spoken, and thank you so much for the team who allowed me to do a bit of some setup. He's a friend of mine who've given him has given a phone to me. Where are you? I have someone's phone. So if you don't have your phone, I have it. Confirm you have your phone. If you don't have, come with several dollars. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, as we are in anticipation to receive our principal guest. It is my singular honor and duty to request all of us to give a lot of applause to our UN Residence Coordinator here in Nairobi, our good friend, Mr. Stephen Jackson, to give us his statement. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hand together for our friend, Stephen Jackson. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. So, to Madam SRSG, the Special Representative of the Secretary-General, Vanessa Fraser, to Norway's State Secretary, Andreas Kravik, my friend, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues and friends, good morning. I have been asked to do two things today, one of which I'm very comfortable doing, which is offering some words of thanks and welcome on behalf of the United Nations in Kenya. The second, I'm much less comfortable doing, which is adding my thoughts on the importance of safe schools. And the reason I'm uncomfortable with that, I'll come to in just a second. So let me start with the sincere thanks. Thanks to the Government of Kenya, indeed, and His Excellency, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, will be with us very shortly. Also to thank the Safe School champion countries. Norway, through you, State Secretary, Spain, Argentina, Nigeria, but all of the, I think, more than 60 countries in the room, and the more than 100 that we have present in Kenya through the diplomatic corps, the 193 member states of the United Nations, all of you in your different ways keeping this agenda alive and urgent. So that's the thanks and the welcome. The bit that I'm much less comfortable doing is adding my thoughts when we've heard so eloquently and movingly already this morning from our extraordinary young moderator, who I think did just an amazing job of reminding us how real this agenda is. And then my sister, Julia, from UNRWA, who just reminded us very viscerally how real, how alive, how important, but also how tragic and violated this agenda is. We are gathering at a time when, paradoxically, the Safe Schools Declaration matters more than ever, because in many ways it's being violated more than ever. Around the world, schools, places that should be sanctuaries of learning, are under attack. In 2023 alone, the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack documented over 3,000 incidents of attacks on schools, on students, and on educators. And, well, it's the oldest cliche in the world, isn't it? Behind every statistic of that kind is a shattered classroom, a teacher silence, a child robbed of their future. Right at the start of my own career in the 1990s, because I am an old man now, I worked in a succession of humanitarian crises. Somalia in 1992, Rwanda 1994, Angola, DR Congo. And I won't forget until the day I die that in all of those places I had exchanges with kids who had been driven or bombed out of their homes and their schools, kids who you could so easily imagine saying some of the things that that little girl on the video from Gaza was saying about how much she misses her school, how much it's not the bombs that she fears or the bullets, but it is the thought that she might never again have the opportunity to learn. A little bit later, in 2007, our kids, 3 of them, they were young, missed 2 days of school because of open armed conflict on the streets of Kinshasa. Just 2 days. But it gave me the narrowest of windows into what it would be like to be a parent whose kids were missing not 2 days, but 2 years or 2 decades of education. Whether in Gaza, in Ukraine, in Sudan, we can keep multiplying the examples. DR Congo, a country that I know and love very well. This is the human cost of these attacks. And it's been said in so many ways this morning, and it will be said in many other ways as we continue. Education is a lifeline, not just a service that you can put to one side. When conflict causes schools to close, then hope also closes. When schools close, indeed, the Sustainable Development Goals fade. They're no longer the North Star of our collective determination and aspiration as a planet. Those 17 SDGs are left as just a forlorn and unachievable dream. And so we simply can't accept, permit, tolerate this. Not in this 21st century. Excellencies and friends, the states that have signed the Safe Schools Declaration are therefore duty bearers. That isn't just a symbolic point, it's a legal and moral responsibility. And implementing the Safe Schools Declaration means very concrete things, like the obligation to integrate the protection of education into military doctrine, to ensure accountability for violations, and to allocate resources to keep schools safe, even in times of crisis. So governments have a singular responsibility, but they can't do it alone. And civil society, the media, and communities are all essential to this fight too, and I know that all of those segments of our societies are represented in this chamber. Civil society in particular does and must call out attacks on education, amplify the voices of victims, and demand justice. Silence is complicity. Loud and persistent advocacy can afford at least a measure of protection. And so, as we get underway with this conference, let us remember, safeguarding education is not optional, it is foundational. It's the cornerstone of resilience, recovery, and again, of the Sustainable Development Goals, because education is at the foundation of the SDGs. If we fail to protect schools, we fail the SDGs. If we fail the SDGs, we fail the future. Sometimes, as I close, we're faced with cliche, because cliche somehow still tells the truth. It is said that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I think we're here in this room, in this chamber, to take note that it takes the world to protect a child's right to learn. So thank you for your solidarity in that fight, and let's hope that this meeting is more than just words, but takes forward a very real commitment to protect that child's right to learn, every child's right to learn. Asanteni sana, as we say here in Nairobi. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, the United Nations Residence Coordinator, for your candid words, Mr. Stephen Jackson. We don't take it for granted for you finding time to be with us, though out of your busy schedule, but we thank God for having given you opportunity to share with us. It is evident that this is not only a conference, but it is a conference of commitment. We are all here gathered this morning, this afternoon, in order for us to elucidate and look at the back, give an account of the 5 international conferences that have taken place, and ask ourselves, what are the gains? Where have we done it right? Where do we need to pull up our socks if we have them? What do we need to do as people who believe in safe schools? This being a decade of commitment, 10 years down the line, having done a global gathering for safe schools, out of risk. So it is evidence that all of us seated here today, everyone have a role. As I was doing my opening remarks this morning, I said, if Christ himself, for those who are believers, gave a statement and said, let the children come to me. So who are you to scatter children? It is evident that all of us seated here today, we have a role to play. We have an engagement that we need to give, a commitment that we need to sign in our hearts. And by so doing, it will be prudent that our children are safe wherever they are. Our moderator this morning, the child representative, said, our children go to school with no idea. They go to school without knowing who they are. And that's where the students, the pupils are taken through by their teachers, the tutors, the guardians, by nurturing their talents and identifying their potentials and strengths. And at that point is when we have upcoming leaders from a well-trained, well-character trained and nurtured traits in our children. But without an environment that is conducive, that will not happen. So it is a clarion call for each and every one of us, organizations, states, to make sure that our children are safe. Once the children are safe, the nation is safe. In the community I come from, we say if we don't take care of our children, we don't have a continuation of a generation. And I do believe even in your community you do so. If the children are not taken care of, there will be no continuation of generations. And the kind of generations you want to nurture will be dictated by the environment that you give unto them. So it is my call this morning that when we gather here to celebrate a decade of commitment, to celebrate the 5th, we give it our best. We spoke of this conference setting a tone for us to underscore the centrality of the protection of children's rights and ensuring safe and quality education. That will only happen if all of us, we take our personal responsibility, and I said this from the states, organizations, bodies that are given the mandate to protect the children. And above it all, giving the children an opportunity to address their issues. And I'm very glad because this conference is a very unique one, that we've given an opportunity to the children to be with us. They'll be giving us a session after the formal program of the opening session. They'll be having children here on stage to share with us. What do they go through? What trauma do we cause to them? And what do they think will be our role as their parents, their guardians, in relation to making their stay a safe stay for them? If some of us were not given an opportunity to do what we believe in, today will not be where we are. As a consultancy in terms of communication, media, publicity, and conflict management issues, I grew in a community that I was given an opportunity to explore, to identify my potential, to identify my strengths, work and reduce my threats, work on my weaknesses, and today I stand in front of an international congregation to address you. Were it not that the community I come from gave me an opportunity and a conducive environment to thrive in, today I will not be where I am. When you listen to a good friend of mine called Andrea, I don't know whether he's in the house or not. When you listen to him, he will share stories of how people grew, how people went through horror, how people have been tortured, and these are children. But I'm glad because we're here to take account of the 5 years we've been in this conference. And as we celebrate the decade, as I've said, it is our role to ask ourselves, are we in the right direction? Are we protecting our children? Are we giving them an opportunity to grow? Are we giving them an opportunity to explore who they are? When I was growing, I remember if a father was a primary school teacher and the mother was a high school teacher, then the child would be forced to become a nursery school teacher. We're not giving the children an opportunity to explore what they are best at. But I'm glad because our first speaker this morning, Director Daktari, said, when we have an environment that is conducive for our children, we'll give them the competence-based learning environment, we'll have the kind of the moderator we've had this morning. Very eloquent, with stage management, with confidence, and above all, a knowledgeable child. That is where we want to move to. So that in the next 5 years to come, as we celebrate the 10th anniversary, we'll look back and count and ask ourselves, what are the gains? Where have we gone right? And where do we need to improve? It is my prayer that by the time we are leaving this conference, everybody will go home with an action. That I will not be able to do 10 things, but I can do 3 things. Itemize them, give yourself some timelines. And when we meet in the 6th anniversary, just the way neighbors spoke to each other, you'll be able to speak to your neighbor and say, neighbor, when we were in Kenya, the moderator Mike told us, think on a few things that you can do to address this issue. And when we meet next, you'll give us your scorecard. That is where we are moving to. So it is my call, and I'm happy because I could see people taking notes. I could see delegations discussing among themselves that we forge our way forward. Not only to have a conference, with this kind of an environment, very nice one, but after the environment, after the conference, what next? We always ask ourselves, after school, what? After schooling, what? So when we give an environment which is conducive for our children, they will start building a nurtured mind that even after this generation is no longer there, we all believe that there is a stability in our children. How many times do you think of a child and then you say, this is the generation that was spoken, they don't listen, they don't hear, they don't understand. In Kiswahili we say, wamepotea. But it is our role as parents, as guardians, to speak to them. We give them a safe stay. We train them, give them an opportunity to build what they think is right. And by so doing, things will be okay. Some music interlude. As we are on standby to receive the chief guest.
بذكر لكم يعني بعض المواقف مع الحرب. أول موقف أتذكر إنه كان في صف رابع في المدرسة. أول مرة وقع فيها قصف كان بقصص الصواريخ. يعني قصف الصواريخ كان قوي جدا. فلما يجي ضرب قوي فيضطروا ينزلوا الدول السطحية.
Тільки страшно, що тривога може бути, прильот, бо школа – це учебний заклад. По таким місцям часто стріляють зараз.
akwai abin da ya faru. An Boko Haram suka mai hari daidai Magariba so kona ajujuwan mu. Abin da a lokacin gaskiya ya faru da suka kona makarantar mu na ji kunci sosai.
كل ما نيجي المدرسة نسمع دانا سمعنا الجامعة قالتنا في سور المدرسة.
Akwai lokacin da muna zaune aka zo aka kori malamanmu aka sa wa makarantar mu wuta.
Sentirme insegura en el colegio me afecta de muchas formas, ya que uno siempre mantiene en la expectativa de que vaya a pasar algo o de que pasen los drones con bombas y de pronto vaya a caer uno en el colegio.
A escola todo quemaron con cunguero.
أنا أدرس علوم الحرب. يعني لبناء مستقبل لأنه لدرس البيت يعني وين رايحة؟ لازم إنك تكون متعلم.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for our principal guest who is joining us. A bit of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Let's welcome our principal guest. I will invite all of us to be upstanding. With the permission of our principal guest, please resume to your seats. Our chief guest, the Prime Cabinet Secretary and the Cabinet for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, His Excellency Musalia Mudavadi, the Cabinet Secretary for the Minister of Education, Mr. Julius Maigosi Ogamba, the Cabinet and State Secretaries from other states present, Excellencies, Ambassadors, members of the Diplomatic Corps, the Principal Secretaries present, Director General present, Regional Directors present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is a good morning, Your Excellency, sir, as you join us in this celebration. As we come together as champions of safety for our children. Our clarion call, safe education for all, a decade of commitment, a call for action through the Safe Schools Declaration. Sir, with your permission, allow me to invite our Principal Secretary for Education, Professor Abasanda Bitok, to come on stage and give us a welcome remark. Let's appreciate our PS as he takes the stage.
Your Excellency, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, Honorable Julius Migozo Gamba, Cabinet Secretary for Ministry of Education, my colleague PS for State Department for Children, PS Karen Agenga, Excellency Ambassadors, distinguished delegates, representatives of the UN, the civil society, the African Union, academia, our courageous children and youth, allow me to begin by saying a warm welcome to all of us to Safe Schools Declaration 2025. Most welcome. My name is Ambassador Professor Julius Bitok, PS for Basic Education. Allow me to read a few remarks. It is my profound honor to welcome all of you to Nairobi for the 5th International Conference on Safe Schools Declaration. We are deeply privileged to host this landmark gathering, one that marks 10 years of collective commitment to protect education from the devastation of armed conflict. Karibu sana. In Kenya we say karibu. This conference is historic because we are commemorating 10 years, of which 25 years of optimal protocols on the involvement of children in armed conflict, and stand right after the African Union's year of education. Our goal, of course, in this conference is both very clear and very urgent: to strengthen the protection of education by 2030 through a common action plan to accelerate the implementation of Safe Schools Declaration and ensure that all attacks on education are met with accountability, not silence. So let us remember that behind every child, or rather behind every statistic, is a child whose dreams have been delayed or destroyed, a teacher forced to flee, or a community scared by war. So it is really, really critical. So today, even as we come together to assess where we stand, and be bold to confront the gaps that remain in this very important subject. Your Excellency, allow me to say that may this gathering be driven by courage, compassion, and conviction towards safe education. May our work here pave way for safer schools, empower children, create resilient communities across the world. In conclusion, Your Excellency, let us make this conference a turning point for education in conflict-affected areas. Your Excellency, sir, even as we reflect on this very important topic, allow me to say that under the competency-based education in Kenya, we believe that the pathways that we have created, the 3 pathways, that is STEM, social sciences, and arts and sports, creates a very good opportunity to create a very safe environment for our children, because we are not forcing children to do what they don't like. We are encouraging them to be competent in the talents that they have. In addition to that, we are also committed to ensuring that our schools around the country are safe. And we are building capacity of our quality assurance officers so that in every corner of this country, the safety of our children is assured. As I wind up, I want to say, while I was in the State Department for Immigration and Citizen Services, we championed the Shirika Plan, which is an integral part of this conversation. And we are confident that the discussions around Shirika Plan adds value to this very important conversation. At this point, allow me to once again welcome all of us to Kenya enjoy the hospitality of Kenya. Karibu sana, all our partners, all our hosts, all our international guests and partners from Argentina, from Norway, from Spain, from Nigeria, UNICEF, from African Union. Karibu sana. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A lot of applause for the Principal Secretary. Thank you so much, Ambassador Professor Bitok, for that candid welcome remark. In any situation, if you don't have an objective, you'll just go helter-skelter. But I'm glad because this morning, Madam Ola, who is our chair, Global Coalition, Protection Education from Attack, is now taking the stage to give us the objective. Why are we here? A round of applause for our chair as she gives us the objectives of this conference. Welcome, Madam Chair.
Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs of Kenya, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends. It is an honour to welcome you to Nairobi for the 5th International Conference on the Safe Schools Declaration. I am deeply grateful to the Government of Kenya, to our co-hosts, and to all of you for your leadership and your presence. We are gathered here today to build on previous conferences hosted by Norway, Argentina, Spain, and Nigeria, to reflect on progress made, to share challenges and best practices, and to align on collective strategies and the way forward to protect education in conflict. We meet here at a moment when the world urgently needs renewed resolve to protect education from attack. Across the world, we increasingly see schools destroyed, students and teachers killed, access to learning threatened, and entire education systems destabilized and shut down by conflict. Children, and in particular girls, are disproportionately harmed and are navigating wars they did not choose while still striving to learn, to grow, and to hope. Their courage calls us to action, and their futures in part depend on the choices that we make here. The most recent data from the 2025 Children in Armed Conflict report includes 41,370 incidents, the highest number of grave violations against children in armed conflict since the inception of the mandate almost 30 years ago, and a 25% increase compared to the previous year. Most grave violations showed an increase, including, as we have already heard here this morning, a shocking 44% increase in verified reports of attacks on schools and a 34% increase in rape and other forms of sexual violence. Meanwhile, respect for humanitarian principles is eroding, and we see this most grievously in attacks on education and other violations against children. The news and statistics can feel overwhelming. However, simultaneously, committed partners continue their work to protect education despite global and local challenges. Indeed, they are spurred on by them. This year marks 10 years since the Safe Schools Declaration was launched, and what began with 37 pioneering states in Oslo has become a global community of 122 governments committed to making learning safe. It has been a fruitful journey together, and over the past decade, we have seen real progress. Military doctrines and training increasingly recognize the need to protect schools, including from military use, and monitoring and reporting on attacks on education has expanded, and national laws, policies, and practices have been strengthened. This is meaningful progress. But anniversaries are not only moments to celebrate how far we have come, they are also moments to recommit to how far we still must go. For nearly 15 years, the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack has worked to confront the reality of attacks on education. Our research, advocacy, and implementation support have been built through state-led and collective action, and it has been propelled by human rights-driven governments and people with conviction, expertise, and a lot of passion. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge one of the representatives of Norway who is here with us today, a relentless advocate whose diplomatic skill and belief in the power of education were instrumental in establishing and strengthening the Safe Schools Declaration. Katrina Anderson's unwavering commitment has done much to protect children caught in armed conflict, and as a representative of Norway, she is the embodiment of being a champion for safe schools. We also take a moment to remember Professor Stephen Haynes, who passed away last month. His vision and scholarship helped to articulate the principle that schools and universities must never be militarized. His contribution to the development of the guidelines for protecting schools and universities from military use during armed conflict remain a cornerstone of our global efforts to keep learning spaces safe, and his legacy endures in his scholarship and in our gratitude. These remarkable individuals and many more that have contributed to these causes, very many of whom we are lucky to share this space with today, remind us that progress relies not only on coalitions and political agreements, but on dedicated individuals who see what is possible and work tirelessly to make it real. This conference is unlike any of the previous Safe Schools Declaration conferences, and as I look around, I want to acknowledge that never before have we had so many affected states so meaningfully represented. Much of the content of the sessions and the solutions that we will be showcasing are the result of the work of partners involved with the state-led implementation network. The design of these sessions and this work has been collaborative, working closely with champion states, with GCPA members and partners. And the participation of children and youth leaders, representatives, is a cause of celebration. I know that we're all very impressed. It is also a humbling reminder of how high the stakes are. This conference is an opportunity to create change. This is the time for new endorsements and a critical assessment of what's needed to realize the Safe Schools Declaration on the ground. We must deepen our engagement, strengthen cooperation across sectors, and build on commitments to date. This is a moment to be ambitious, to identify where protection is weakest and where progress can be accelerated. It is a moment to move from broad support to concrete action. We must prioritize actionable implementation strategies, strengthen accountability at a time of growing impunity, and increase monitoring at a time when funding and support is being slashed. While we are extremely fortunate to have more robust youth and survivor inclusion than ever before at a Safe Schools conference, it is not enough, and we must all do more. Children and families consistently rate education as a top priority during humanitarian crises, and this is the moment to listen to them and to that plea. To young people, to teachers, to communities, and to those who live with consequences of war, yet still believe in the transformative power of education. GCPEA stands ready to work with every government and every partner represented here. Lasting progress depends on what all of us choose to do, not only in declarations, but in policy, in practice, and in the sustained work of implementation. Let's make these 2 days together matter, both through what we commit to and what we deliver. Let us leave no ambiguity in our message to the world. Schools will not be battlefields, students will not be targets, and education will not be sacrificed to conflict. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to our chair, Ola Monique, the chair, Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack. We now know where we are, where we want to go, and what is our expectation. One key thing that I've captured from that, it is this should be an action, solution-oriented conference, ever before. I now invite all of us, ladies and gentlemen, our chief guest, to focus on the screens so that we can get the Commissioner Haji Lahab to give us our remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to speak to you at this 5th International Conference on the Safe Schools Declaration. And many thanks to the government of Kenya for hosting this event. And I'm particularly pleased to have this year's conference taking place in Africa. Today marks 10 years of our shared work to protect education as essential civilian infrastructure, vital for children's lives, their futures, and for peace building and recovery. Education is a foundation for hope, freedom, and resilience. It's a lifeline for millions of children in conflict and humanitarian crisis. But today, the right to learn safely is under more pressure than ever. Attacks on education are not only continuing, they are getting worse. So our determination must be stronger than the threats we face. In Gaza, more than 97% of schools are damaged or destroyed. In Ukraine, nearly 4 out of 10 children can only learn online or in mixed formats because of Russia's war. In West and Central Africa, school closure due to insecurity have almost doubled since 2019. And Myanmar is now one of the most dangerous places in the world for students and teachers. Attacks on schools, one of the 6 grave violations against children in conflict, have long-term consequences. More dropouts, more child labor, more sexual and gender-based violence, more child marriage, and more recruitment by armed groups. Dear friends, in this difficult context, the EU stands firm. We will continue dedicating at least 10% of our humanitarian funding to education in emergencies, more than 175 million euros every year. This investment supports work on the ground and strengthens global advocacy to put into action the Safe Schools Declaration. We help teachers provide psychological first aid, and we support schools as zones of peace and protection. We also work with communities to raise awareness of risks and link education with disaster preparedness, while developing strategies to keep children safe from violence, conflict, and natural hazards in and around schools. Our revised EU guidelines on children and armed conflict reinforce our efforts to prevent, respond to, and ultimately end grave violations against children caught in war. All of this is part of humanitarian diplomacy, pushing for access to aid and respect for international humanitarian law. Dear friends, I'm committed to continuing our political and financial support to protect the right to education and to ensure safe, quality learning for every child affected by conflict and crisis. Together, we can protect the life-saving power of education. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is European Commissioner for Equality, Preparedness and Crisis Management, European Commission. It is now my singular duty to welcome Ms. Erika Sanchez-Pinto, who is the Colombian Congresswoman, also to come on stage and give her commitment. Let's appreciate her as she takes the stage.
Muy buenos días a Su Excelencia, Secretario General, embajadores, parlamentarios, delegados de organizaciones internacionales y a todos los presentes. Hoy nos reunimos en este importante evento internacional para unir nuestros esfuerzos en trabajar por lograr que el derecho a la educación en el mundo sea una realidad para nuestros niños, niñas y adolescentes. En Colombia, el derecho a la educación atraviesa una crisis silenciosa pero persistente. Mientras el país avanza en su proceso de paz y reconstrucción, cientos de escuelas han sido blanco de ataques, ocupaciones militares o escenarios de reclutamiento forzado, afectando de manera desproporcionada a nuestros niños, a nuestras niñas y a nuestros docentes en comunidades rurales enteras. Lejos de ser casos aislados, los ataques a la educación configuran un patrón documentado de violencia que atenta el desarrollo social, la seguridad humana y los principios fundamentales del derecho internacional humanitario. Hoy vengo a hablarles desde la convicción de que cada aula hay algo sagrado, la promesa de un futuro. Cuando una escuela es atacada, ocupada o convertida en escenario de violencia, no solo es un techo el que se fractura, se rompen sueños, se interrumpen proyectos de vida, se siembran miedos en los cuerpos y en la memoria colectiva. Cada pupitre vacío es una voz que dejamos de escuchar. Cada cuaderno perdido, una historia que no tendremos la oportunidad de leer. No puede ser que en un país que sueña con la paz, la escuela siga pagando el precio de la guerra. No puede ser que las balas y los habitantes de la violencia penetren los patios donde deberían jugar la curiosidad y el asombro de nuestra niñez. No puede ser que en vez de tener un niño, un lápiz, un color para dibujar su futuro, estén empuñando hoy un arma. Defender la educación no es un lujo técnico, es un acto de justicia, es un acto de dignidad y es un acto de esperanza. Es proteger el derecho de una niña a imaginarse científica, de un niño a ser maestro y de una comunidad a reconstruirse con saberes propios. Proteger la escuela es proteger la paz. Cada medida legislativa, cada presupuesto, cada visita de autoridades a una institución educativa en riesgo es la manera en que el Estado le dice a la humanidad: no están solos, contaremos y estaremos con ustedes. Pero no basta las palabras bonitas ni las estadísticas bien presentadas en oficinas. La protección real exige que nosotros como parlamentarios, que nosotros desde el Congreso y por supuesto con nuestro Gobierno Nacional de Colombia sigamos alzando la voz y mantengamos en firme la priorización de los recursos, garantizar rutas de protección, responsabilizar a quienes usan la escuela como instrumento de violencia y escuchar con respeto a quienes más saben, las comunidades y los maestros. Hoy como parlamentaria, como congresista, quiero reafianzar el compromiso con la implementación de la Declaración Internacional de Escuelas Seguras. Invitarlos a todos ustedes a que desde la política dejemos no solamente los debates, sino convertamos este proyecto en un futuro realizable. Visitemos las escuelas en riesgo, firmemos garantías con las comunidades, monitoreemos con transparencia los recursos de cooperación internacional y los recursos del presupuesto de cada país destinados a brindar reparación a quienes han vivido la violencia educativa y sobre todo hacer de la no repetición un principio incuestionable. A quienes legislan les digo, sus decisiones tienen nombre. A quienes gobiernan les digo, les recuerdo que cada medida que tomemos es una promesa con consecuencia humana. Y a todos ustedes, personas presentes, defensores de la niñez, su voz cuenta. Su cuidado hace la diferencia. Cuidar la escuela es cuidar el mañana. La paz se enseña y se aprende en el aula. Si protegemos a la escuela, protegemos la dignidad de las próximas generaciones. Si protegemos la educación, estamos protegiendo la posibilidad real de transformar la violencia en convivencia. Mi país, Colombia, se ha comprometido en dar continuidad a la implementación del Plan Nacional de Escuelas Seguras 2022-2026. Seguiremos garantizando espacios escolares desmilitarizados y seguros. Seguiremos fortaleciendo la coordinación intersectorial e internacional. Seguiremos monitoreando y rindiendo cuentas a los entes de control. Seguiremos atendiendo integralmente a las víctimas educativas y seguiremos impartiendo la innovación tecnológica y comunitaria. Por último, como presidenta de la Comisión de Infancia y Adolescencia del Parlamento colombiano, seguiremos fortaleciendo el marco legal de protección, creando leyes específicas que reconozcan las escuelas como infraestructuras críticas y civiles. En tiempos de conflicto, con sanciones agravadas para quienes ataquen o usen militarmente las escuelas de nuestros niños. Reformaremos el Código Penal para tipificar como delito autónomo el ataque a la ocupación militar de las escuelas. La Declaración de las Escuelas Seguras ya ha inspirado cambios similares en otras naciones. Y en Colombia, nosotros como legislativo adoptaremos el compromiso internacional en leyes concretas. Seguiremos revisando y aplicaremos con rigor las leyes vigentes, como por ejemplo la Ley 833 del 2003, que en mi país se aprueba el protocolo adicional sobre menores en conflicto. Garantizaremos la asignación y vigilancia presupuestal, sin centrar la estrategia solo en lo económico. Realizaremos control político y crearemos comisiones especializadas. Y como parlamentaria me voy a mi país con el compromiso de crear una comisión especial, integral, en el Congreso, donde el Ministerio de Educación, el Ministerio de Defensa y los entes de control haremos un seguimiento exhaustivo a la implementación y a los acuerdos que se lleven hoy en este maravilloso escenario de defensa de los derechos de la niñez. Incentivaremos la acción intersectorial desde la ley, promoviendo la incorporación de la Cátedra de Paz, que es algo que ya venimos avanzando en Colombia y que estamos reeducando a nuestros niños, porque la paz inicia en los hogares y en las instituciones educativas. Y por último, seguiremos creando alianzas legislativas, internacionales y de cooperación, porque la niñez no es el futuro de la humanidad, la niñez es el presente y es el ahora. Y por ello tenemos que seguir trabajando juntos para que logremos garantizar a nuestros niños, niñas y adolescentes sus derechos como sujetos especial de protección. Que la educación sea un derecho ya. Muchas gracias.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The next level of commitment we will now hear from COMESA. Dr. Oita Etiang would not be here with us today, would have been here with us today, but he will be represented by Mr. Richard Otwaru. Please join me to welcome my brother Richard Otwaru on stage to give us the remarks on behalf of Mr. Oita Etiang.
Thank you. Our guest of honor, the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, Your Excellencies here present, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. It is with a great honor and privilege to be with you all here today. On behalf of my Secretary General, High Excellency Chileshe Mpundu Kapwepwe, I bring you warm greetings from the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa. For our delegates who are not familiar with COMESA, it has a membership of 21 member states, all scattered within Africa. And when I listened to the first session where there are grave violations against children, in the first session, our member states are also part of it. DRC was highly mentioned, and Sudan, where there are active conflicts. Those are all members of COMESA. First of all, our appreciation to the government of the Republic of Kenya and our co-organizers for convening this 5th International Conference on the Safe Schools Declaration. This gathering takes place against a sobering backdrop. Across the region, our children continue to bear the heaviest burden of conflict and insecurity. Schools in conflict-affected states have been destroyed or militarized, whilst in some communities, children walk long distances, in some instances through conflict zones, just to attend class. Our children risk sexual violence and exploitation, recruitment as child soldiers, family separation, displacement, and the right to access education. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the Safe Schools Declaration reminds us that education is not only a human right, it is in every sense an act of peace building. In conflict-affected societies, classrooms often become the first line of defense for stability. This is where children regain a sense of normalcy, where communities heal, and where nations begin to rebuild their social fabric after crisis. As COMESA, we believe protecting education is a central humanitarian concern for sustaining peace, regional stability, and economic transformation. Education equips young people with values and skills to resolve disputes peacefully, counter extremism, and build livelihoods, all of which are foundational stones for long-term security and prosperity. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, we can all agree that no child in school becomes a child soldier. No community with learning thrives on violence. When education systems collapse under the weight of conflict, the costs ripple far beyond the classroom. Labor markets shrink, cross-border trade declines, and regional integration efforts falter. On the other hand, when education is safeguarded, it becomes a peace dividend that strengthens government and social cohesion and inclusive growth across the region. Therefore, by aligning its peace, security, and governance programs with the Safe School Declaration, COMESA positions education as both a peace-building instrument and economic enabler, serving a bridge for conflict prevention, regional integration, and sustainable development. Protecting education for COMESA is protecting the region's most strategic asset. It is human capital and it is future. The COMESA region is one of the most demographically useful and yet conflict-affected regions in Africa. Our region faces a myriad of security challenges, including armed conflict, climate-related disasters, economic fragility, and population displacement, which all undermine education and the well-being of children. Ongoing hostilities in some of the member states, I've already alluded to, some of them have forced millions of children out of school. In the Great Lakes region alone, the occupation of schools by armed groups continues to deny children access to safe learning spaces. Cross-border extremism has led to attacks on schools and teachers in some parts of the Horn of Africa. Meanwhile, climate shocks such as cyclones have destroyed infrastructure and forced children to abandon learning to help their families survive in parts of Southern Africa. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, to respond decisively to the continuing suffering of children in conflict situations, COMESA has taken deliberate actions to develop a comprehensive regional strategy on children affected by armed conflict. This framework is fully aligned with the Africa Peace and Security Architecture and with the principles of Safe School Declarations, ensuring that education and child protection are placed at the very center of our regional peace and security agenda. We have developed a CAC strategy for implementation from 2026 to 2030. This strategy responds directly to the 6 grave violations against our children identified by the United Nations Security Council, including attack on schools, the recruitment and use of children in armed groups, abductions, and sexual violence. The strategy is anchored on 3 strategic pillars, namely prevention, protection, and promotion. In addition to the strategy, we have also developed guidelines on disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration for children associated with armed forces and armed groups. These guidelines were developed in recognition of a painful reality that several of our member states' children continue to forcibly be recruited and exploited by armed groups. Through these guidelines, we seek to provide practical direction to troop and police contributing countries on how to manage such cases in line with international human rights and humanitarian standards. Anchored on 3 principles, we aim to ensure that every child associated with armed group must be treated first and foremost as a victim, never as a perpetrator. Education is central to integration and recovery. Every disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration process must create a pathway back to formal or vocational learning. And lastly, all actions must uphold the principle of do no harm and best interest of the child with full sensitivity to trauma, culture, and community reintegration. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, to sustain peace beyond the cessation of conflict, COMESA has also developed a technical guidance notes on post-conflict reconstruction and development, PCRD. This framework takes a long-term view, ensuring that children and education remain at the center of rebuilding societies emerging from war. It recognizes that the true measure of recovery is not how quickly buildings are rebuilt, but how effectively the lives and the hopes of our children are resolved. Conflicts in our region leave children not only as witnesses, but as casualties, participants, and survivors. They are robbed of their childhoods, their education, and often their sense of belonging. The guidance note is therefore our way of ensuring children are not forgotten once the fighting stops, but are part of the rebuilding and reconstruction process. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, these commitments are not just aspirations on paper. COMESA's CAC initiatives are already yielding measurable progress in the region. First, on evidence generation, COMESA conducted the first regional mapping study on children affected by armed conflict way back in 2021, which established a solid evidence base linking security, child protection, and education disruption, and proposed child-sensitive indicators for our early warning system. The second, on capacity building, COMESA and Save the Children convened 2 regional sensitization workshops in Eswatini for Southern Africa and Uganda for Eastern Africa, engaging civil society, human rights institutions to strengthen advocacy, develop CAC early warning indicators, and promote coordinated regional action. As we mark 10 years of collective commitment under the SSD and deliberate over the next few days, COMESA calls for renewed resolve and coordinated regional action to translate these commitments to tangible protection of our children. First, we urge all member states to domesticate and institutionalize the SSD within their national frameworks on education, defense, justice, and humanitarian response. Let us ensure that this document becomes a lived reality embedded with our national laws, educational policies, and peace building. Second, COMESA encourages governments to integrate child protection and access to education indicators into national and regional early warning and resilience systems. This will enable real-time detection of risks to learners and schools, allowing for swift protection. Thirdly, we call for enhanced regional cooperation to ensure continuity of education for displaced and the refugee children, including mutual recognition of learning and safe cross-border access to schooling. During conflict, education must be treated as essential service that follows the child, not a privilege lost to circumstances beyond their control. Finally, COMESA commits to aligning its CAC initiatives with the outcomes of this conference and the Nairobi Action Plan, as well as working hand in hand with partners, governments, communities to ensure that every child in our region can learn in a safe space with dignity, hope, even in most difficult circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, let us remember, when we protect our schools, we protect our peace. When we safeguard our children, we secure the future of our region. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That is Richard Atuaru on behalf of COMESA. As I invite on stage once again the Principal Secretary, Ambassador Bitok, to come and take us to the next level of engagement, I will seek the indulgence of everyone who will be coming on stage, because I see I have a list of 7 who are to make a statement. This is the co-host statements. I just seek your indulgence with the guidance of the CS, Education Kenya, Mr. Ugamba. Kindly let us confine ourselves into the statement, each take maybe less than 3 minutes, so that we can finalize this session. Bwana PS Bitok, kindly.
Our chief guest once again, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, our Prime Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign, our Minister Amigos, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I've been given a simple task to introduce the Minister. But before I introduce the Minister, allow me to introduce my colleague, PS for State Department for Children, PS Karen Akengo. When we put our hands together to... Thank you very much, PS. We are now going to the ministerial level, and allow me to introduce my Minister, Advocate Julius Migos Ogamba, who is our sector leader and has been very instrumental in putting together this conference. As you're all aware, this is an interministerial conference. It brings together different departments, different agencies, different ministries together, and with the leadership of Wakili Ogamba, we've been able to come together, put our ideas together. He's been actually leading from the front in terms of ideas, in terms of policies, and we really appreciate his work even as he brings together. This Safe Schools Declaration is very critical in the sense that when we protect everybody, there's consensus around the world that when a child is protected, the society is protected. There's consensus across the board, and our CS here has been very categorical that Safe Schools Declaration conference has to be done in a very, very special way. So let us put our hands together to invite Advocate Honorable Julius Migos, advocate of more than 30 years in legal practice. Let's put our hands together to invite him. Karibu sana wakili. Thank you very much.
Thank you, PS. Thank you. Your Excellency, the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, Your Excellencies, distinguished ministers here present, representatives of the African Union and the United Nations, members of the diplomatic corps here present, esteemed delegates, development partners, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Morning again. Let me start by first and foremost thanking Your Excellency for getting time to come. I know that you had a very hectic program, and apologize on our own behalf for starting late. We were supposed to be a bit earlier, but we had other engagements, so we came a bit late. Secondly, let me take this opportunity on behalf of the ministry and on behalf of the team that has put this conference together to welcome all of you to Kenya and to thank you most sincerely for undertaking this exercise of coming up with a Safe Schools Declaration, which to me is the most important aspect on the education sector, not just in Kenya, but across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, as you well know, for those countries like ours that have placed it in our constitutions that education is a basic right, it cannot be a basic right, it cannot be achieved if our schools are unsafe for our children. And I hasten even to postulate that the safety of our schools and of our children in those schools should not only be limited to situations of armed conflict. In situations where, for example, there is internal conflict, external conflict, or crises or violence arising out of such issues as election violence in the country, the safety and the children's safety in our schools becomes of paramount importance. So what I'm saying or suggesting is that as you deliberate, we might want to do an extension of this declaration not only to cover armed conflict, but to extend to crises and other violent situations that affect our schools, affect our children in every and each situation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have the co-hosts making statements here, and as you've been informed, let's limit those statements to 4 minutes, and then thereafter, we have about 7 of them. I'll make the last one, number 8, and then I invite His Excellency to make his remarks. And to start us off is Andreas Modsveld Kravit of Norway. I might not have pronounced it very well because the pronunciation sometimes differs. I pronounce it the way we could pronounce it in Kenya. Please welcome.
The pronunciation was perfect. Excellency Prime Cabinet Secretary Musala Mudavadi, Cabinet Secretary Obamba, Principal Secretary Bitok, Excellencies, government officials, co-hosts, champion states, and not least youth representatives. It's a great honor to address you here today at this important conference. And let me just preface my remarks by saying again that we're very grateful to the Kenyan government, and we would like to thank His Excellency Musala Mudavadi personally for his engagement and for his commitment to this conference. I know you have been personally involved and you have been personally committed into making this conference a success, and we're very grateful for that. Let me also take this opportunity and thank especially the youth representatives. As I think we are all aware of, young people, youth, are disproportionately affected by armed conflict. So to see so many young people here, I spoke to my friend Ibrahim from Nigeria just a few moments ago, and we chatted about the importance of this instrument, and that young people come to this event, hold us accountable, demanding that we do better, is a challenge that we should appreciate and a challenge that we should meet. And again, we're very grateful for that opportunity. It's a great honor to address you today at this important conference. 11 years ago, Save the Children approached the Norwegian government about the terrible situation children in armed conflict were facing. The military use of schools and attacks on educational facilities were a growing concern. Children and youth were put at great risk, and they were often denied their right to education. Few things are more important for children and youth and for society than safe access to education. Something needed to change, and it was urgent that states take on this challenge. and Norway reached out to a few key states to champion this issue. And on May 28, 2015, the Safe Schools Declaration was launched in Oslo, Norway. 37 states immediately endorsed it. Today, 10 years later, we are gathered here in Nairobi for the 5th International Conference on the Safe Schools Declaration. We are grateful again to Kenya for hosting this important event, and Norway is proud to be a co-host. The conference brings together governments, UN agencies, civil society, academia, and youth advocates to reflect on progress and share experiences. And the number of endorsing states have now grown from 37 to 122. And the declaration has now become an internationally accepted standard, encouraging states to prevent attacks on education and limit the military use of schools and universities. The cooperation between states, civil society, and multilateral organizations, including the Global Coalition for the Protection of Education from Attack, has laid the groundwork for our achievements. And I'm happy to see so many representatives from these groups here today. At the heart of the declaration are the guidelines for protecting schools and universities from military use during armed conflict. These guidelines clearly articulate that educational facilities should not be used to support military operations, and the rights to education must be upheld also during armed conflict. It is encouraging to see how endorsing states have integrated these principles into military policy and practices, including in the recent update of the Norwegian Military Manual. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a time of significant global instability. Conflicts rage in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And despite the progress we have made, attacks on educational facilities continue. Schools are bombed, burned, and occupied. Students and teachers are killed, injured, abducted, or arbitrarily detained. Should we be discouraged? Absolutely not. We must never ignore the fundamental need children express to have safe access to education. What gives me hope is that we know, and is well documented, that where the declaration is implemented, educational facilities and people connected to them are better protected. The continuation of education is better ensured. This underscores why the Safe School Declaration remains indispensable. It gives us a standard that all parties to conflict are measured against and provides clear guidance on how to do better. The voices of civil society, the media, and communities continue to call out attacks on education. These attacks are not accepted. They are seen as crossing a line. Accountability is demanded. Together we must continue those who cross the line that we have set out. We must continue our work to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, and we must continue to uphold the dignity of children and students and respect their fundamental rights. By doing so, we protect not only their future, but our shared humanity. And thank you again for giving me the opportunity to provide this speech. Thank you.
Thank you, and well done within the minutes. And it's encouraging to see that the countries have moved from 37 to 122. And maybe it is time for us to encourage those states to ensure that the Safe Schools Declaration finds its way into the national laws of each and every country that is part and parcel of it. Our next speaker is Lucia Garcia Rico from Spain. Welcome.
Excelencias, distinguidas autoridades, primer ministro, distinguidas autoridades, distinguidos delegados. España saluda y agradece al Gobierno de Kenia la organización de esta quinta Conferencia Internacional de Escuelas Seguras y su liderazgo decidido para hacerla posible en este 10º aniversario de la Declaración Escuelas Seguras. Agradecemos también el impulso destacado de la Coalición Global para proteger a la educación frente a los ataques, aliada imprescindible en la implementación de esta declaración. En esta lista de agradecimientos no debe faltar la mención a los representantes de organismos internacionales, ONGs y sociedad civil también presentes, imprescindibles en esta década de avances. 10 años después de la adopción de la declaración, sin embargo, el panorama es sombrío. Las escuelas siguen siendo atacadas y los datos que Naciones Unidas nos aporta reflejan que en los últimos años incluso se han incrementado en un 44%. España tiene un firme compromiso con la protección de la educación como derecho fundamental y como habilitante de otros derechos fundamentales. Apoyamos firmemente la Declaración Escuelas Seguras, el mayor compromiso político internacional para garantizar el derecho a la educación durante los conflictos armados. En esta década, 122 Estados nos hemos comprometido a proteger a estudiantes y a docentes y a evitar que las escuelas y universidades se conviertan en objetivos militares. Los datos mencionados deben impulsarnos a redoblar esfuerzos hacia la plena aplicación de la Declaración, así como para lograr su universalidad. Permítanme destacar algunas lecciones aprendidas de nuestra experiencia en estos 10 años. En primer lugar, la necesidad de reforzar los mecanismos de monitoreo e investigación, para con esos datos poder exigir la rendición de cuentas y la reparación de las víctimas. España está firmemente comprometida con la lucha contra la impunidad, la rendición de cuentas y la protección de las víctimas en los ataques contra las escuelas, y lo defendemos y promovemos en todos los foros. En este sentido, en julio de este año organizamos con la coalición un seminario sobre ataques a escuelas y rendición de cuentas, celebrado en Ginebra para discutir estrategias. Es, en segundo lugar, muy importante destacar la necesidad de colaborar con las autoridades locales. Es fundamental e imprescindible también incorporar la perspectiva regional para facilitar el intercambio de experiencias cercanas sobre las que aprender. España reitera su apoyo a los esfuerzos nacionales y a los comités y planes de acción de implementación de la Declaración y a las directrices que se están desarrollando en países como Colombia, Guatemala, los países andinos o diversos países sahelianos. También es imprescindible el enfoque multiactor. Ministerios civiles y militares, sociedad civil, líderes religiosos, grupos armados no estatales. Todos ellos deben integrarse en la estrategia de protección de la educación. Para ello, deben estar sensibilizados y formados en los principios de precaución, protección, prevención y mitigación. Es fundamental también que los diferentes niveles de la Administración puedan mantener un diálogo permanente con todos ellos. Debemos buscar acuerdos colectivos que impulsen cambios en las prácticas y actitudes, asegurar la participación de niñas, niños y adolescentes con enfoques positivos y transformadores de género, buscando espacios para la construcción de una cultura de paz. Los ataques a la educación no son neutros. Las niñas suelen ser blanco específico de violencia por motivos de géneros. Ellas sufren desproporcionadamente más agresiones físicas, secuestros, matrimonios forzados y violencia sexual, vulnerando su derecho a la educación y perpetuando ciclos de discriminación y exclusión, aumentando la probabilidad de abandono escolar y retroalimentando la brecha de género. España tiene el firme compromiso de apoyar respuestas sensibles al género para garantizar entornos educativos seguros y equitativos. El compromiso de España con la Declaración se concreta en la prioridad que otorgamos a la educación en emergencias y a la Agenda Escuelas Seguras. Hemos fortalecido significativamente las actuaciones en este sector, a través de las agencias de Naciones Unidas y de la sociedad civil y a través de iniciativas de diplomacia humanitaria. Colaboramos con UNICEF, UNRWA, así como con Save the Children, entre otros. Abordamos nuestro trabajo siempre desde una perspectiva de nexo entre la acción humanitaria, el desarrollo, la construcción de la paz y la acción climática, vinculando educación en emergencias con resiliencia y prevención. España, a través de la Agencia de Cooperación, ha integrado notablemente los fondos destinados a la educación en emergencias, destinando más de 50 millones de euros desde 2017 a 2024. En 6 años hemos pasado de no alcanzar 1 millón de euros a los casi 12 millones en el año pasado. Queremos consolidar esta línea de trabajo, que prevé aumentar la contribución de España en ayuda oficial al desarrollo hasta el 0,7% del PIB e incluye el compromiso de que al menos el 10% de ese presupuesto se destine a la acción humanitaria. Para concluir, 10 años después de nuestra adhesión a la Declaración, participamos copatrocinando esta 5ª conferencia, con la misma determinación para continuar afianzando los avances y plantear nuevos objetivos que nos lleven a mayores logros. Nuestro compromiso es seguir promoviendo la universalización de la Declaración, impulsar la rendición de cuentas y hacer hincapié en el impacto de género. Nos esperan 2 días de intenso trabajo en torno a un objetivo compartido: aprovechar el impulso político y el consenso en torno a esta agenda para concretar líneas prácticas de trabajo que permitan salvar vidas y proteger el derecho universal a la educación. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, and it is important to note that at least Spain is extending that declaration of safety not just to children but also to the teachers, which is, I think, an important aspect. Our next speaker is Ambassador Luis Alejandro Levit from Argentina. Welcome.
His Excellency Mr. Prime Cabinet Secretary and Minister of Foreign Affairs Diaspora, Dr. Mudavadi, His Excellency Cabinet Secretary for Education, Julius Agamba, His Excellency Principal Secretary for Education, Julius Vitok, representatives of Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack, representative for the countries present at the conference, representatives of the civil society. It's a privilege for me to be present as a co-organizer as the 5th International Conference on the Safe School Declaration. Argentina was also a co-founder of this initiative 10 years ago. It is also an honor to share the stage with such important speakers. Let me begin by expressing my gratitude to the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack for its ongoing and indispensable work. I also wish to thank the champion states and non-governmental organizations as co-organizers. I would like to extend a very special thank to the government of Kenya for taking on the responsibility of organizing the conference, its leadership in both timely and significant, especially bring this important agenda to the African continent. I also want to thank Norway and Spain for working alone in this important event and in this process. I would like to highlight the interstate collaboration and the efforts to protect education in the context of armed conflict and the joint work that the champions of this initiative have been developing for years, both at this and previous conferences, including the one held in Argentina in 2017. In that particular conference in Buenos Aires, that experience allowed us to contribute to sustaining the momentum generated in Oslo in 2015. I would also like to acknowledge the strong cooperation of states with civil society and international organizations, many of which are present at the conference. Distinguished delegates, the Republic of Argentina is honored to be present in this forum to focus on the Declaration on Safe Schools and the Nairobi Action Plan, don't forget the Nairobi Action Plan, that will be adopted in this conference. Thus, the guidelines preventing the military use of schools and universities during armed conflicts emerged from a process initiated and led by civil society, centered on existing international humanitarian law, and focused on the problem of frequent and deliberate attack against education. It was in this context that negotiations began in Geneva, seeking through the declaration to achieve a political commitment to use the guidelines and incorporate them into school defense practices. It is worth to mention that neither the 4 Geneva Conventions nor the additional protocols contain provisions that expressly address the protection of schools. This highlights the importance of these initiatives that bring us together today. Argentina is not immune to the profound humanitarian crisis the world faces, especially in areas affected by armed conflicts, where indiscriminate or deliberate attacks, particularly against the civilian population and civilian objects, violate international human rights law. As part of its commitment to the comprehensive defense of human rights and the strengthening for international humanitarian law, Argentina wishes to draw attention to the seriousness of attacks against education in the context of armed conflicts. Let me be very clear. Maybe the Colombian congressman already mentioned that attacking a school for a regular army is a crime. It's also a crime to occupy schools, store weapons in a school facility, and hide them behind students. I wish to emphasize that the declaration is not only relevant for countries experiencing armed conflicts, but also for the entire international community. since its universalization contributes to the expansion of a community of interest that seeks to prevent the military use of educational facilities and to protect and ensure the continuity of education during armed conflicts, commitment assumed upon joining the declaration. Distinguished representatives, it is important to emphasize that attacks on education weaken the population, public and private institutions, and compromise the ability of those most effective of ambition a different future. In this regard, we believe it is crucial to highlight the relevance and timelessness of this declaration given the attacks on schools during armed conflicts remain a pressing humanitarian challenge. Distinguished delegates, protecting education will lead us to dialogue, critical thinking, and the development of socio-emotional skills that can not only contribute to peaceful coexistence and tolerance, but will also serve as a cornerstone for preventing future conflicts. For this reason, while thanking the states present and acknowledge for collaborative work, I urge those countries to have not yet signed the declaration to take this an opportunity to do so here in Nairobi. Finally, I wish to emphasize that this initiative is not only about protecting schools and children, it is about securing the future of our societies for a better tomorrow. Thank you very much.
I think the emphasis is that the Nairobi Action Plan must now be clear that you'll be moving from a declaration to implementation. Our next speaker is Louise, the UNESCO Regional Director, Louise Axelsen. Very, very difficult. We need to do something about it. Welcome.
Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, Cabinet Secretary for Education, State Secretary of Norway, champions of the Safe School Declaration, being its states, peoples, and in particular young people present in this room. Distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, it is a great honor for UNESCO to join you as we mark the 10th anniversary of the Safe Schools Declaration. A decade on, our message remains simple and urgent. Schools must be places of safety and learning, never battlefields, never targets, and never tools of war. This anniversary is not only a moment to reflect on what we have accomplished together, it is also a call to intensify our collective efforts to guarantee that protection that every learner and teacher deserve. So, what can UNESCO do more? And what can UNESCO do better? With less than 5 years remaining to achieve SDG 4, we are reminded that leaving no one behind means prioritizing the most vulnerable populations, especially those living and learning in conflict zones. To reinforce this commitment, UNESCO is strengthening its support for national implementation of the Safe Schools Declaration and UN Security Council Resolution 2601. A major step forward in this effort is the development of the new preventive plan of action to protect education from attack requested by UNESCO's Executive Board. We drafted this plan with strong inputs from our key partners, many of whom are with us here in the room today, as well as from member states and our field offices. It brings together UNESCO's existing work and sets out a stronger, more coordinated path forward. The plan is still being refined, but its core is around 3 main areas of action to be implemented by UNESCO at the global, regional, and national level. And let me take you through these 3 priorities for UNESCO in relation to the Safe Schools Declaration. First, stronger global advocacy and partnerships. We aim to keep the Safe Schools Declaration high on the global agenda and help governments translate commitments into concrete changes on the ground. Second, a more robust education in emergencies response. This means helping countries integrate school safety into their education plans, training teachers and school leaders for crisis situations, improving infrastructure standards, and ensuring learning continues even in times of emergency. So very much action focused both on prevention, action during emergencies, and in its immediate aftermath. And third, advancing education for peace. Through the new recommendation on education for peace, human rights, and sustainable development, UNESCO will support countries in building learning environment that promotes respect, non-violence, and social cohesion, so that schools contribute to preventing conflict, not only responding to it. The plan will be reviewed by experts and presented for adoption at the 2026 spring session of UNESCO's Executive Board. As we continue to refine it, we look forward to working closely with all of you to ensure that it delivers real impact. At the same time, UNESCO continues to play its central role as lead agency for SDG 4, supporting member states to build resilient education systems and safeguard learning during emergencies and throughout post-conflict recovery. We remain committed to supporting refugees, displaced populations, and host communities from early childhood through higher education and technical and vocational learning. As we enter the next decade of the Safe Schools Declaration, we reaffirm our full commitment to working with partners and member states to accelerate its implementation, to ensure that every learner and every teacher can learn and teach in safety and dignity. Together, we can and we will turn this vision into real change for the communities we serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A call to action to guarantee the safety of our children and teachers, and let's leave no one behind. Our next speaker is the UNICEF Regional Director, Ekleva Kadili. Please welcome.
Your Excellency, Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, Cabinet Secretary of Education and PS of Education, Mr. Andres Krevik, State Secretary, Norway, Ms. Vanessa Fraser, SRSG CAC, Ibrahim, our amazing, wonderful young child from Nigeria that joined us this morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues and partners and friends, children and young people, all protocols duly observed. On behalf of our Executive Director, Catherine Russels, I'm very honored to join you today to this historic milestone, the 10th anniversary of Safe School Declarations. I want to begin by thanking Your Excellency and the Government of Kenya for the leadership in hosting this landmark conference and for championing the protection of education across Africa and beyond. I'd also like to thank the government of Argentina, Norway, and Spain, and Special Representative SRSG CAC and all partners who actually are all here committed and are contributing and collaborating to this conference and make it possible. We are gathering at this very moment when education is under attack worldwide. The recent reports of scores of children and teachers abducted during 2 attacks on schools in Nigeria just last week serves as shocking and heartbreaking reminder of why the Safe School Declarations must be fully implemented. Globally, millions of children have seen their schools damaged, destroyed or occupied by armed forces and groups. The numbers tell a stark story. Since 2005, the UN has verified over 14,000 attacks on schools, students, and teachers, and education personnel worldwide. Nearly 2 attacks every day for the last 2 decades. So the scale of destructions is staggering. In Gaza, 97% of schools have been damaged or destroyed since 2023. In Sudan, over 19,000 schools remain closed, affecting 7 million children. In Ukraine, thousands of education facilities have been destroyed since 2022. These attacks destroy more than just buildings. They destroy children's future and the very foundation upon which peaceful societies are built. Yet, we also witness communities refusing to give up, teachers risking their lives to keep learning alive, and governments taking concrete actions to protect schools. Today, we are all here to accelerate action. UNICEF calls on all stakeholders to focus on 3 priorities. First, turn political promises into protection on the ground. The Safe School Declaration must be translated into national laws, military doctrines, and operational practices. Perpetrators must be held accountable through strengthened legal mechanisms. Countries like South Sudan and Somalia have shown already their leadership, and we encourage others to learn and follow at the scale of what works. Second, ensure continuity of education and rapid recovery. Schools need safety plans and early warning systems to protect learning when conflict threatens. When disrupted, rapid rehabilitation and reopening are essential. Maintaining learning through alternative pathways and bridge children back to formal schooling while providing mental health and psychosocial support to all affected. Third, protect and increase financing for education in emergencies. The funding crisis is truly acute. An estimated 2 million children in humanitarian setting risk being out of school by the end of 2026, as global aid funding for education in emergencies is projected to reduce and be cut by US $745 million. This year alone, education emergency funding has seen a lot of cuts. For example, for Sudan and Chad, the cut actually goes to up to 90%. Therefore, it is imperative to underscore that education is life-saving intervention that will ultimately contribute directly to the peace and security, and therefore must be prioritized and fully funded. Over the next 2 days, we will chart our path forwards. Let us commit to concrete actions, measurable progress, and hold each other accountable through 2030. UNICEF stands ready to support governments, work alongside communities and partners with each of you to work and to make safe education a reality for every child affected by conflict. Let us leave Nairobi with renewed determination, not just to protect education, but to ensure that every child, no matter where they live, they can learn in safety and build a better future. Thank you. Asante sana.
Thank you, UNICEF, and thank you for all your support and for your invitation that you'll continue working with all governments to support this declaration. Our next speaker is Mr. Hajir Malim, Regional Director for Middle Eastern and Southern Africa Region Plan International.
Your Excellencies, allow me to write on the protocol already established. As a child, I always navigated the fear of my own safety when I was going to school. That was 3 decades ago. But one incident I always remember is when I was leaving class one evening. When I was confronted by armed men. I couldn't speak because I didn't want to say, because any one wrong word could be deadly. Every day and today, children and teachers risk their life simply on their journey to school and while sitting in their classrooms. This reality is a stark reminder of why the Safe School Declaration remains as vital today as it was 10 years ago. Attacks on education are not gender neutral. When education is under threat, both boys and girls face devastating and lifelong consequences. Girls may be exposed to sexual violence, trafficking and child marriage, while boys are often at a heightened risk of recruitment into armed groups, forced labor, or other forms of exploitation. In every case, children are denied the right to safety, learning, and opportunity. Protecting education means recognizing and addressing these different risks and ensuring that responses are informed by and tailored to the needs and the lived experiences of both boys and girls. For Plan International, the commitment to safeguard education has never been more urgent. Over the past decade, we have worked closely with the Ministries of Education, communities, and partners to strengthen the Safe School implementation. From Cameroon and the Central Sahel to Latin America and Southeast Asia. We have supported efforts to translate the Safe School Declaration guidelines into local languages. We have helped develop school safety plans and worked directly with adolescent girls to ensure that their priorities and solutions are heard in conflict-affected settings. But more must be done, and we believe several actions are critical, and allow me to state 4 of them. The first, let's prioritize gender-responsive measures to ensure that girls and boys whose education have been disrupted by attacks can return to learning as soon as possible. Secondly, protect and educate at the same time. The right to learn and the right to be safe are inseparable. We urge governments and donors to invest in integrated approaches that combine access to learning with mental health and psychosocial support and strengthen teachers' training. Third, move from commitment to localization and scale. The Safe School Declaration must be implemented where it matters most, in communities, in classrooms, and in crisis-affected areas. This means locally funded gender-sensitive school safety plans, as well as educational alternatives for displaced and out-of-school children. Finally, elevate the voices of children in decision-making. Boys and girls are affected by conflict, understand better than anyone what it feels to feel safe and continue their education. Their perspective that is shaped by experiences of violence, displacement, and exclusion must drive the solutions we design, especially for those most at risk of being left behind. Let us ensure that the next decade of the Safe School Declaration delivers real, measurable change, where no child is denied education because of violence, where no school is treated as a battlefield, and where girls and boys everywhere are protected, supported, and empowered to learn in safety. Thank you very much.
Yes, let's move from commitment to implementation on the ground. Thank you so very much, Plan International. Our next speaker is Henrietta Westrin, CEO Save the Children, Norway. Please welcome.
Excellencies, child delegation, ladies and gentlemen, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela's words reminds us that education is not only a human right, but it's a tool for change, a tool for peace and democracy. Schools should be sanctuaries for children, not targets of war. They should never become military bases or battlegrounds. Yet, according to the Education Under Attack 2024 report, 8 attacks on education occur every single day. Conflict is rising. Save the Children's new report, Stop the War on Children, shows there's a record high number of children, 1 out of 5 globally, now grow up in conflict zones. And in Africa, 1 out of 3. This means millions of children wake up every day surrounded by violence, uncertainty, and fear. And that makes this conference not just relevant, it makes it urgent. When children learn, they gain power to shape their own lives and society. And at the last Safe School Conference, children from across the world wrote a manifesto to you, the leaders in this room. And the words they wrote that time, they still echo today. They said, "We are scared when we see military vehicles outside our school. We are scared when our classroom becomes a barrack. We are scared when soldiers stop us on our way to school and when we hear they are recruiting children in the next village. We are scared when bombs fall near our playground. We are scared when our teachers disappear, and we are scared when our school is destroyed." And this fear is not abstract. It lives in the bodies and hearts of millions of children. And we know that when fear enters the classroom, learning leads. The Safe School Declaration matters because it protects children. So to those who have not signed, please sign now. There are no excuses left. And to those who have signed, keep your promise. Protect every school, every child, every day. Because a declaration without implementation, that's just words. And children, they deserve more than words. If we fail to protect education, we lose future scientists, teachers, doctors, and leaders, and with them the chance for peace and prosperity. Well, yes, we are losing peace before it even begins. 10 years on, the Safe School Declaration shows what political will can achieve. But attacks are rising again, and we cannot accept this normalization of the unacceptable. So, to the governments here, turn your words into protection. Review your military manuals. Train your armed forces. And fund education in emergency. And most of all, listen to the children whose future depend on your choices. If we truly want peace, we must start where peace begins, and that's in the classrooms. Thank you.
Your Excellency, distinguished delegates, once again, it's a great honor to welcome you to Kenya and to this important 5th International Conference on the Safe Schools Declaration. This gathering is a testament to our shared conviction that education must remain protected, uninterrupted, and accessible to every learner regardless of their circumstances. I'm deeply encouraged by the level of global representation in this room today, and I affirm the Ministry of Education's strong support towards advancing this vital agenda. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the Safe Schools Declaration, now marking a decade since its inception, has emerged as a beacon of hope for millions of learners worldwide. The theme of this year's conference, Safe Education for All, a decade of commitment, a call to action, reminds us that while much has been achieved in advocacy, policy adoption, and global consensus, the true measure of success lies in meaningful implementation. A commitment is only powerful if it translates into protection, and action is only meaningful if it safeguards the future of our children. In Kenya, we are working tirelessly to integrate the principles of the Safe Schools Declaration across our education and security frameworks. We recognize that insecurity disrupts learning, and therefore we are strengthening interministerial coordination to reduce risks to learners, teachers, and the school's infrastructure. We have increasingly adopted approaches that maintain school operations even during periods of localized instability, expanded psychological support in vulnerable regions, and supported teacher preparedness in crisis management. These efforts affirm our belief that learning must never be suspended, even in the face of adversity. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, we are aware that across Africa and the world, too many children walk long distances through areas affected by insecurity. Too many teachers work in hardship conditions, and too many schools remain vulnerable to disruption or attack. These challenges are not merely statistics. They are stories of interrupted dreams. That's why this conference must be action-driven. The discussions held here must focus on strengthening national protection measures, fostering international support, enhancing accountability for violations, and increasing investment in education during crisis. Let us take advantage of this moment to ensure that the next decade of the Safe Schools Declaration transitions from advocacy to implementation and from pledges to measurable outcomes. Let Nairobi be remembered as a place where global commitment evolved into coordinated delivery and where we strengthened our resolve to protect education as a human right and a foundation for peace. Allow me, Your Excellency, at this juncture to express sincere appreciation to our international co-hosts and partners, Norway, Argentina, Spain, Nigeria, the African Union, UNICEF, UNESCO, the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack, civil society organizations, and youth champions for their continued leadership and technical support in this area. I also pay tribute to teachers, especially those in hardship areas, whose dedication ensure learning continues despite difficulties, and to learners whose courage inspires us all. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin this important conference, I am confident that our deliberations will be constructive, collaborative, and focused on practical solutions. Together, let us reaffirm our responsibility to protect every child's right to safe education. And with that, it is now my singular honor to invite the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, Your Excellency Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, to deliver your remarks. Welcome, Your Excellency. And thank you very much, and may this conference bear fruit. Asanteni sana.
Thank you. Please be seated. My colleague, Honorable Migos Ogamba, Your Excellencies, the State Secretary of Norway, Congress leaders, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and all our international partners and esteemed delegates, good afternoon. It is an honor to address you today at the official opening of the 5th International Conference on the Safe Schools Declaration here in Nairobi. On behalf of His Excellency, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya, and the government and people of Kenya, I warmly welcome all delegates, policymakers, technical experts, and child advocates gathered here today. The theme of this year's conference, Safe Education for All, a decade of commitment, a call to action through the Safe Schools Declaration, is a compelling reminder that 10 years after the declaration was launched, our resolve must deepen and our actions must accelerate. A decade of commitments is meaningful only if it yields a decade of results. Today we gather in Nairobi with 121 endorsing countries, demonstrating global solidarity for the protection of education. Yet while these commitments signal a strong international consensus, the real measure of our resolve lies in effective implementation. Across the world, schools are attacked, repurposed, or closed due to insecurity. Children traverse dangerous routes to access education. Teachers face constant risk, and many learners, especially girls, vulnerable children, and those in marginalized communities struggle to pursue their education amidst adversity. Around the world, and especially in Africa, violent conflicts continue to leave children bearing the deepest scars, with their learning institutions destroyed or turned into targets of insecurity. By the end of 2024, an estimated 48.8 million children had been displaced by violent conflicts and disasters, including 19.1 million alone in Africa, which is more than half of the global total. In our own neighborhood of the Horn of Africa, Sudan now faces the largest child displacement crisis in the world, with over 6.5 million children uprooted after 2 years of relentless violence. According to Save the Children, since the outbreak of war in 2023, a child has been forced to flee every 10 seconds. This situation risks leaving an entire generation out of school indefinitely. As of June 2024, for example, over 14,000 schools are closed due to armed conflict in West and Central Africa, mass abductions of students by armed groups continue to undermine the safety of our schools. Terrorism and insurgency in Africa's Sahel region have led to closure of thousands of schools. Closer home, in some parts of northern Kenya and the wider Horn of Africa region, learners have in the past endured interruptions due to intercommunal violence and cross-border insecurity. Some schools have had to temporarily relocate learners, and teachers have been evacuated during high-risk moments. These tragedies are more than statistics. They are stories of interrupted futures and derailed dreams. It is our responsibility as the current generation and leaders to safeguard the next generation, ensure their protection and continuity of progress. With this awareness, Kenya remains firmly committed to the Safe Schools Declaration. We have begun integrating its principles into education and national security frameworks, enhancing coordination between the ministries responsible for education, interior, and security to mitigate risks in vulnerable regions. The government is enhancing teacher preparedness for crisis situations, strengthening psychosocial support, and ensuring continued access to learning in conflict-affected areas or counties. Hosting this 5th conference demonstrates Kenya's commitment not just to share in global protection strategies, but to actively advance them. It is a significant milestone that the Safe Schools Declaration has been endorsed and supported by global leadership, including the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who has emphasized that the right to education must never be suspended, even in war. Education is the foundation of peace and the first step towards recovery. When schools fall silent, the path to stability grows longer. This conference must therefore be a turning point. While the last decade built a strong framework, the next must deliver measurable impact. Our focus should be on practical solutions, preventing the military use of schools, protecting teachers and learners, ensuring accountability for attacks, restoring access to learning, strengthening national monitoring, and mobilizing greater investment in education during crisis, because without funding, aspirations will remain unfulfilled. The 5th conference here in Nairobi marks a step from political commitments to operational action, where our decade of commitment turns into a decade of delivery. Let us renew our promise today that no child, no teacher, and no school shall ever be left unprotected. In conclusion, I express deep appreciation to our co-hosts and partners, Norway, thank you, Mr. Minister, Argentina, Spain, Nigeria, the African Union, UNICEF, UNESCO, the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack, civil society, and youth advocates for their steadfast leadership. I also salute our teachers tirelessly, working under difficult conditions, and the learners who pursue education with courage despite adversity. It is my distinguished honor, on behalf of the government of the Republic of Kenya, to officially declare the 5th International Conference on the Safe Schools Declaration open. And before I step off the podium, maybe I can just emphasize that let's also now have some special conversation around the threat that comes with AI. As much as we are talking about the safety of our schools, now there's a new threat, the cyber threat, the psychological warfare that is now beginning to take a different form, which can lead to a lot of scars. It can lead to a lot of suicide. It can lead to a lot of depression. As you deliberate, let's not just focus on the element of armed conflict. Let us realize that technology has now come with its challenges. As we embrace it, how do we make sure that our schools are safe with this new, silent, partner? I didn't say enemy, I said partner. Because technology is our partner. But the question then, do all partners come with good intentions? That's the question we may want to ask ourselves. So let's dedicate some time to that, to just focus on that threat that comes with the new technologies that we have. May our deliberations be practical and fruitful. Thank you. May God bless you. May God bless Africa. May God bless Kenya. Asante sana.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's appreciate our chief guest, Dr. His Excellency Musalia Mudavadi.